Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're popping the hood on a machine that affects every single one of us literally every day, yet it rarely gets the systematic breakdown it actually deserves. We're diving straight into the actual nitty-gritty mechanics of good governance. Because think about it, have you ever wondered how a modern parliament should really function if we just stripped away all the noise, the daily drama, and the political theater? What are the actual practical rules of the road for responsible legislative decision-making? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today, and we're bringing a clear structural blueprint for accountability along with us.
Before we get into the weeds, just consider this quote for a second. Citizens already understand their unmet needs. What they expect is solutions, not retrospection. Honestly, I love starting with this right out of the gate because it instantly validates that core, nagging frustration so many of us feel when we watch modern politics. I mean, we know what the problems are, right? We're the ones living with them. What we actually want from our elected officials is this relentless, absolutely no-nonsense focus on fixing those problems, instead of, endlessly looking in the rearview mirror to point fingers. It sets a perfect, totally practical tone for our explainer today. We are strictly focusing on solutions and the true standard of responsible lawmaking.
Okay, so let's dive into this blueprint. We're going to look at lawmaking systematically, pillar by pillar. We'll cover the true purpose of Parliament, why time is taxpayer money, relying on real experts, global best practices, and finally, the modern lawmaking standard.
Starting right off with Section 1, the true purpose of Parliament, and keeping the focus strictly on substance. I want you to think of passing a new law kind of like launching a massive nationwide product. Now, if you run a serious business, you don't just, toss a product into the market without strict quality assurance, right? That'd be a total disaster. Well, the exact same logic applies to legislation. Parliament is essentially the ultimate quality assurance department for a country's laws. Parliamentarians are entrusted by the public to evaluate legislation, not based on vibes or scoring partisan points, but through these 4 highly specific, purposeful steps. Step 1, a strict cost-benefit analysis. Basically, is the juice actually worth the squeeze? Step 2, carefully weighing the pros and cons of proposed provisions. Step 3, assessing the expected social, economic, and administrative impact, like what actually happens to everyday people and businesses when this thing passes. And finally, Step 4, the feasibility of implementation. Can this literally be done in the real world? This is exactly what purposeful, evidence-based deliberation looks like, to make sure laws actually align with national priorities.
And that naturally brings us to a really core concept here, upholding the public mandate. Listen, politicians hold office because citizens believed in their commitment to deliver better governance, right now. This mandate requires serious discipline. The public expects forward-looking action, delivering timely, effective legislation for the current moment. What they absolutely do not want is to watch parliamentarians waste time in these prolonged, circular discussions about, say, past administrations or what the previous government did wrong. The job is about the present and the future. Period.
Moving right along to Section 2, time is taxpayer money. It's all about respecting public resources.
And this one directly addresses your wallet. It is incredibly easy for us to just think of parliamentary debate as a bunch of people talking in a big fancy room, but we really need to reframe how we view that time. The time allocated for legislative debate is a highly expensive public resource, and it is funded directly by you, the taxpayer. Every single minute the lights are on, the microphones are hot, and the session is in progress, it carries a very real, measurable financial cost. When we start viewing parliamentary time as a finite, highly expensive public resource, well, the standard for how that time should be used absolutely skyrockets.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly it creates a stark contrast between the ideal focus of our lawmakers and the reality we so often end up seeing. On one side, you've got the proper focus, cost-benefit, social impact, feasibility, the good stuff. But on the exact opposite side is a glaring misuse of time. When parliamentarians use this massively expensive public resource for personal political commentary, or blame shifting, or just endlessly revisiting the incomplete work of previous governments, they aren't just being annoying to watch, they are actively misusing taxpayer funds. And frankly, this kind of partisan narrative actively degrades public trust, mostly because it completely distracts from the core job of actually solving our unmet needs.
Okay, Section 3. Relying on real experts and making sure we consult the properly qualified ones.
So, you might be asking, how do we actually keep lawmakers focused on the true substance of a bill? Well, remember that product launch analogy we talked about earlier? Before any bill is finalized and just shipped out to the public, there absolutely must be a rigorous quality control check. And that means bringing in outside subject matter experts. I mean, parliamentarians cannot possibly be experts in literally everything, and honestly, they shouldn't even pretend to be. They need to systematically seek input from a wide net of qualified professionals.
We're talking academics and researchers who bring the hard data, industry specialists who actually understand market realities, legal and regulatory pros who can spot a loophole from a mile away, civil society organizations advocating for citizens on the ground, and of course, technical agencies and independent authorities who understand all those granular details.
And why is casting this wide net so absolutely crucial? Because expert consultation is what actually grounds our laws in real-world knowledge, rather than just political assumptions or wishful thinking. By bringing in these highly diverse, specialized voices, lawmakers dramatically strengthen the technical quality of the legislation, and, maybe more importantly, they significantly reduce the chances of disastrous, unintended consequences down the line. It basically takes the guesswork completely out of the equation.
Which brings us to Section 4, Global Best Practices for High-Quality Lawmaking.
Now, you might be thinking at this point, okay, sure, but does this actually happen anywhere in the real world? It actually does. We really don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We just need to look a bit beyond our own borders to see how other modern nations achieve this high standard. This data brilliantly illustrates the global benchmarks that modern legislative bodies already follow. For instance, requiring committees to invite expert testimony through public hearings? That's just standard practice in the EU, the UK, Australia, and Singapore. Or what about mandatory regulatory impact assessments, or RIAs, before a bill is even tabled just to guarantee decisions are data-driven? New Zealand, Canada, and South Korea already mandate this. And evidence-based policymaking frameworks are essentially standard issue across OECD member states for evaluating economic, social, and regulatory effects. Honestly, seeing this should create a bit of FOMO for us. These aren't wild, radical ideas. They are literally just the standard operating procedures for modern functioning nations.
And it actually goes even further than just those initial assessments. These best practices also bake in transparent stakeholder engagement, meaning open consultations, published reports, and open public comment periods so citizens are, actually included in the whole process. It also heavily relies on committee-driven refinement. This is where specialized committees review, amend, and deeply improve the bills long before they ever reach the full chamber for a vote. These highly structured, highly transparent processes actively reduce policy failures, and crucially, they build massive public confidence in the system itself.
Finally, let's head into Section 5, the modern lawmaking standard and what effective governance actually looks like. We've looked at the true purpose, the actual cost of taxpayer time, the absolute need for experts, and global benchmarks. Now, let's tie this entire powerful blueprint all together. A high-performing parliament is ultimately defined by these key traits. It uses time efficiently because it actually respects taxpayer money. It bases decisions strictly on evidence rather than empty rhetoric. It systematically consults experts. It follows structured global best practices. It focuses entirely on the substance of the legislation. And above all else, it prioritizes the needs of the people. So the crucial point is this. This framework isn't just some utopian wish list. This is the fundamental baseline standard expected in modern democratic governance. It's the absolute foundation you need for effective national development. Which really leaves us with one final unavoidable question to wrap up this explainer. I want you to look at the blueprint we just laid out. Think about the efficiency, the expert consultation, the strict focus on actual solutions instead of constant blame shifting. Now ask yourself, does your parliament meet the standard of modern democratic governance? It's a provocative thought for sure, but a highly necessary one. Ultimately, it is up to us as focused, informed citizens to understand these mechanics so we can hold our elected officials accountable to this exact standard. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this blueprint today. Keep asking the right questions, and I'll catch you next time.